Hello everyone, this is the first episode of Poo Poo Park. Why is it called Poo Poo Park? Well, you see, it's because this park is poo poo. I mean, just look at this floor, it's covered in poo poo. This park is a collaboration between me and RJ, aka Jurassic Jaws. If you want to check out his channel, the link will be in the description. But before we start building, let's first take a look at the entrance that RJ built. Let's start off with this poo poo entry building, which features this ATC tower to look out for the helicopters. The entrance building also features a multitude of shops, one of which sells goat milkshakes? Oh god. What does that even mean? There are also two dinosaur skeletons mounted on some very nice looking planters to greet the guests. Past the Jurassic Park gate, it seems RJ went for this tricolor rainbow sort of design, which features floors of poo poo, blue poo poo, and lava. Don't step on the lava, guys. Lava is very hot and dangerous. Damn it. No one ever listens to me. Don't step on the poo poo either, cause you'll stink. Next to the pathing, there's a very nice looking viewing gallery peeking into an enclosure full of Gigantospinosaurus. Behind the enclosure, there's a very long stretch of path containing a possibly possessed go-kart. What is going on? Anyway, back here is a nice little plaza with the focal point being this aviary, which is actually very nice to look at. To be honest, I think this aviary is a pretty nice place to run away from the stinky path people. Anyway, let's get to the construction. The first thing I've decided to do was fill in that large gap of nothing in the middle of the lava path. Even though I haven't fully gotten the hang of modular building yet, I still decided I was gonna have a shot at, building a building. For this structure, I decided to continue the theme of poop by building a poop museum. The vision was to build a museum filled with many different galleries displaying poop. Right now, you might be asking, Jaden, won't the poop museum stink up the whole park? Well, you see, that's the entire point. It isn't called Poo Poo Park for no reason. Anyway, after I built the walls, I went ahead and built the floors. I had a bit of a hassle trying to get rid of the Z clipping that was going on, but in the end, I managed to tidy it up. Then, I used these circular chuckum planters near the entrance as the first teaser you'd get upon walking into the museum. Afterwards, I continued using chuckum to border most of the wall. If you look very closely, you'll see there's a bit of Z clipping, but it won't really matter in the end since I'll be placing poop into the planters to cover it. Finally, we can get into building the big poop enclosures. These galleries are going to be built using these sandstone fence pieces just because those ones have a Greeky feel to it. And if you know anything about museums, you will know that the ancient Greek part of the museum is usually one of the more visited areas. After all, you never leave a museum without seeing the ancient civilization section. The fences also have these pillars, and every archaeologist will tell you that the Greeks absolutely loved using pillars. You also get the sense of grandness when you look at Greek architecture, and if someone wants to glorify poop, you're gonna need the grandeur of the Greeks. It was also at this point where I figured out that move snapping was a thing, and let me tell you, that really helps with haste. Now, I fill in the fencing with some grass flooring. Again, there's gonna be a tiny bit of Z clipping, but it won't really matter since the entire thing will be filled to the brim with poop anyway. We're done with the first sandstone gallery, so now let's build the second one. This gallery will be half the size, but the stink of the poop inside will be just as bad. Even though the museum is inaccessible to the guest NPCs, I decided to keep a little bit of realism by making space for guests to walk around. Afterwards, 3 smaller poop galleries are placed next to that one, this time with much smaller chunks of poop. Now, we finally start filling in the galleries with poop, starting with the biggest gallery. For the poop, I used some of the desert rocks since it has this brownish tint to it, and if you look at the smaller rocks from certain angles, it looks a lot like a small pile of dung. I structured the mound of dung to be sort of like a mountain, with some bits of poo being far higher than the others. Mountains are big and grand, so I thought if I make the poop like a mountain, it'll be just as grand as one. Afterwards, I decided to use some lighting using the biosun lamps. You'll usually see lights like this in gardens or over terrariums. This is what's called a growth light. If light from the sun is either inefficient or over-efficient, gardeners will use growth lights to help grow the plants in a healthier way. Anyway, don't you think we're done with the poop yet since we still have to fill in the chuckum poop planters. I originally thought this process would be quite short, but it actually took far longer than filling in every single one of the sandstone galleries. Now for the exterior. I was wondering I'd have to build the door myself, but thankfully Frontier provided us with multitudes of them that are pre-built. I decided to go for this one since it sort of fits the theme of sandstone. Time for the roof. You'll see in greenhouses and museums that they usually have a sunroof. Since this building is sort of like a greenhouse slash museum for poop, I decided to go for a glass roof. Normally, museums will use tinted glass for their roof, but I really don't think that exists in this game yet. Even if tinted glass is possible, I am not productive enough to figure out how to do it. Back to the walls. I start placing a few windows down even though there aren't actually any windows inside of the museum, so I guess we'll just have to pretend there are windows in there anyway. Lastly, I build the sign for the museum. Of course, the Poop Museum is a very fitting name for this structure here. I even added a pile of rocks in the shape of poo to further emphasize that this place is going to be very stinky. After building the sign, I did place some trims and columns down to make it look a little bit nicer, but the recording cut off before I could show you that process. It was at this point where I realized how truly tedious modular building can be. This entire structure took me 1 hour to build, and in the end, it isn't all that detailed. So it was a pretty humbling experience learning where I really was on the modular building scale of skill. Anyways, time for the second and last thing I built for this episode, an enclosure for the Ornithomimus. I started off with placing 2 viewing towers. Afterwards, I placed some heavy fencing and some large rocks to act as a border. Then I dug down into the dirt since I like the idea of the guests looking down into the enclosure. It also gives the guests a sense of security since it's hard for the dinosaurs to climb up the steep hill. To finish off the outline, I placed down some metal fences. I had a bit of trouble near the end, but I was able to fix the little overhang by covering it with some grass floor. For the enclosure itself, I started off with a little hill, added some water next to it, then added a whole lot of trees. For the rocks in the back, I sank some trees into the stone to give it this mossy look. And that is pretty much everything that I'm going to do in this episode. Before we end this, let's take a look at some of the things we've done. For the Ornithomimus enclosure, although it looks nice, I do wish I'd have put a little more thought and time into it since there are some parts of the enclosure would feel a bit too empty. When it comes to the museum, I think I could have put a little more work into the exterior. Maybe I could have added some more props to the walls or something like that. Lighting is also something I should have really focused on. And yeah, that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you want to see RJ's channel, the link will be right in the description. Anyway, time for shoutouts. Shoutouts to Mr. White and Mrs. White, who isn't actually white, but appears white, aka Tita Jessa and Tito Richie, who bought me this game, who shouldn't be confused with Richie Rich since he is really Richie middle class. Shoutout to Naid Cuss, sorry if I butchered that, who waited 5 months for this shoutout. And last, but definitely least, the Poop Monster, who forced me and RJ to make this park. Have a great day, bye bye.